We wanted to take a moment to thank our presenting sponsor, 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're located at 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet, and they're open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday and 10 to 4 on Saturdays and Sundays. They buy, sell, and trade all sports cards and Pokemon cards, and they have the newest selections of packs, boxes, and single cards of local players and stars from around the league. Make sure you go check out 314 and let them know we sent you. Now back to our episode.
and find you informative. Um, and so when we have this opportunity, it is sort of fun just to sort of touch on some things that maybe we don't do in traditional media, some things that aren't really maybe noticed or talked about. But one of the things I did want to share with you guys today is, it's really been a fun year to be a part of this club. I think expectations going into 2025 was themes like payroll's going down, we're going to give young players a chance, we hope we win a few games, and that type of thing. But that wasn't like the narrative downstairs. As you can imagine, if you're a player and you're playing at this level, you want to show people why you deserve to be here. And this group has done that. And you look back in time, and we went into the off season, and we talked a lot about maybe trading our third baseman. And at one point, we actually did it. Yeah. And then, of course, he rejected the deal, which was fine. Then we went through another iteration of this, and thought I had a deal done with Boston, probably at the 1-inch line, and then they signed Bregman. So we're kind of where we are. But during that whole process, Noel and I stayed in touch, talked through some things. Obviously, it wasn't what we were hoping to accomplish, so it got a little tense at times. But we hugged it out. We're all good. But I think why I share all this with you is because even the best laid plans sometimes change, and they did. And I think in the end, we were still able to come out of this where, as a group, meaning as a team, we still felt pretty good about ourselves. And when I think about this club, I think a couple things come to mind. One is, I think they're a very talented group. I really do. If you just look at each position player or each pitcher and sort of think through what they're good at or what they're not, you'll end up realizing they're pretty good major league players. And then the other thing is, this group just shows you how gritty they are. You hear the word gritty a lot, and sometimes you're not sure what does that actually mean. But when you look at this season, think about how many games we've been in. There's been very few baseball games that we just have not been in. When you think back over the last 2, 3, 4 years, there have been times where we get blown out, we move on. 2023, we fall behind right away, and you just felt like it's over. Now, if you're a true fan of baseball or a fan of the Cardinals, you shouldn't be turning off your TV after the third inning, because you just never know what may happen. And the other part of grit is, today's another day, we have faced so many weather days. We've already played 5 split doubleheaders. It's been 15 in baseball, and we've played 5 of them. So that says something about these guys. They actually don't turn it off. When the lights go on, they show up and play. And from my perspective, I think they've been a fun club to watch. And I really think the next 4 months are going to be exciting. I don't know what the next 8 weeks are going to look like. I mean, obviously, the trade deadline in my line of work becomes very popular to talk about, which if you're writing about the game, it's probably very popular on your side. But as I've stated publicly, I hope it is complicated. I hope we do have to make some really tricky decisions and try to navigate it. But overall, I feel like the type of talent we have coming up from our minor league system, coupled with the types of players we already have on our big league club, I think there's a lot to be excited about. And normally when people in my position either get fired or walk away, it's usually get fired, to be honest. You're doing it because the franchise is in a bad spot. And the one thing that I am very prideful of and very excited about is, I think when I do walk away from this, the franchise is actually in a good spot. And I think Randy Flores and his staff have done an amazing job drafting. I think obviously we talked a lot about player development last year. We have made significant changes in that, but the theme is still the same. It's about producing major league players. And ultimately, I feel like this pipeline is going to continue to flow. And I think as fans, especially prospect Hawks out there, there's a lot to be excited about for the St. Louis Cardinals. So it was a little long-winded, but obviously thrilled to be a Cardinal, thrilled about my last 30 years here. I take a lot of pride in that, and certainly excited about the next generation that's going to take over for the Cardinals. But I think the Cardinals are in a good place. So with that, I will open it up to questions. Yes.
What is your pride or your favorite part about your 30 years that you've been here, and what is your most regret?
Oh boy. All right, pride I think would be being a part of 2 world championships, right? 2006, 2011. When you work in this game, regardless of what your role is, being a part of a championship is why you sign up for this stuff. So that was really cool. Biggest regret, it has to be the Ozuna trade. And I mean, at the time, right, the public was screaming for a middle of the order bat. And I agree, we needed one. But I mean, what we gave up, and as I've lost sleep on this trade for years, but
we have to.
Oh, really? I didn't say you could participate. But it was I mean, obviously, when you're always in a business where you're chasing pitching, to give up those types of starters, that was rough. We had success, but it didn't get us to the place we wanted to. And so, yeah, that deal I lost. Yeah, nice question.
What was you think would be your greatest acquisitions, and why?
Greatest acquisitions. In my tenure or as general manager?
Or both, either one.
I mean, I think Mark McGwire, for the time I was here, when you look back at the importance of what he did, not just for the game of baseball, for this franchise, because when you guys think about attendance as sort of a proxy of how you're having success, we weren't winning a lot of baseball games at that time, but we were drawing 3 million fans because they were coming for the Mark McGwire show. And that did 2 things. One is it created revenue for the Cardinals to then go on and make future investments. And then number 2, it did a lot to save the game. So net, that has to be a part of these 30 years. And then I think about, so are we talking about drafts or just trades?
Just trades.
Just trades. So then I think 2 things come to mind. I'd have to say the Matt Holliday trade, I think, gave us, again, that middle of the order type of bat. What we gave up was not something that we looked back and had to fret over. And then the other player, I think that the timing was just fortuitous for the Cardinals was when we signed Beltran after losing Pujols. So, net, it was kind of a pretty seamless transition. And so I'd say those would be the top ones in my time.
Sure. You talked about how gritty the Cardinals have been, this team is. Does that energize you? They're young, they're hungry, they put a ton of energy. Does that energize you in your job, especially as you're kind of in a weird spot as you're transitioning out?
So I'm a fan just as much as I think many of you. So I just like watching this team. Don't quote me on this, but this is true. So usually you put down your mics. So in 2004, if you recall that club, we were kind of muddling through a 500 season through about mid-May. And then that team just kind of took off. And I remember sitting with Walt, in July, August, and I just remember coming to the ballpark always thinking we were going to win. Just always believed we were going to win. And it's a very similar feeling I have with this club. And I think part of that, again, is we're just in every baseball game. And so you have that type of confidence. And so I think what you're seeing now with this team is the young players, the players on the actual club, have that similar confidence. When they show up to the ballpark, their expectations are to win. 2023, I don't think we had that, right? And now I'm comparing a 2004 team that won 105 games to a team that's a third of the way through the season. That's a big stretch, big leap. But my point is, I really believe that clubhouse has a lot of confidence in what they do. So on a personal level, I absolutely love it. Nothing's worse than coming to the ballpark when you don't think you can win. And so now you back up a step and you say, okay, why is it? All 5 starters have given us innings. All 5 starters have kept us in baseball games. Obviously, the first month of April, all of you are probably like sharpening your pencils, pens, ready to write. But we were in games. Bullpen was a little inconsistent. I mean, obviously, we made a few leaps of faith because of what happened last year, trying to give guys opportunities. They struggled a little bit. But one of what's interesting, too, about our bullpen now, I mean, we have guys really throwing well down in Memphis. I mean, I've done this job a long time. There's been times where, like, if we lose a player up here, I have no idea what the next answer is. Like, it's hope. This year, it's like we have them lined up. We think we have them. We think we have that kind of depth that even if something were to go wrong, we have that type of protection. So that is a very reassuring feeling, especially in this seat. So to answer your question, though, I love this year. It's been fun. Okay, you said.
So at this trade deadline, how would you balance, say the team continues...
I thought he was going to make money.
So say the team continues playing as well as it has, how would you balance adding to this club and trying to go for a win this season with balancing the future of this team and what it can do in future years?
No, it's a super fair question, but I think the timing is just hard to answer, right? If we are where we are come the last week of July, I think we're going to look at ways to improve the club. But if we aren't where we are and we're not playing the way we hope we are playing, then thinking about the future might make the most sense. Clearly, we've always sort of looked at, in my job, I've always sort of looked at managing this as understanding your short view, but also having an eye on the long. And that is a tough balance, especially when, as fans, you don't really care about the long. It's about the now. And ultimately, I think where we are, how we look, but I do think we'll be in a nice position either way. I really think like the theme of this year was basically give young players a chance to play, right? And we're doing that. And so as we get to the trading deadline, I think thematically that's probably going to have to be how we keep thinking. What opportunities can we create in these individuals? So we'll see how this plays out, but ultimately that's how I feel about it right now.
So over the last 30 years, obviously so much has changed from the rules to just the business aspect, media. Is there anything that you feel we've lost in that 30 years that you miss, that you wish it was better back then than what we have now?
I think it's like to answer that question, I'm nervous because I always hated when people talked about past generations as like it was better. And I think like if you're going to be like an advocate for change, you can't really like take that approach. Like I do. There are some things about the game like not having a DH, right? Playing traditional extra inning games, not having a man on second. But I also see the benefits of all those things, and so for me, I as someone that was always like an agent of change, I think the game is in a great place right now. The one thing I think the game is not in a great place in is the economics. It's going to be a very challenging next CBA agreement between the PA and Major League Baseball because there's just a lot of imbalances. And when you look at it compared to other sports, you can see why there's some frustration in the game of baseball. I mean, look at the NBA playoffs, for example. I mean, these are two like small market, mid-market teams that are able to compete because they have a revenue model that works. But I think the game is amazing. I still think baseball is the greatest game on earth. You watch it, and nothing's ever really determined until that final out, and that's pretty cool. I'll think more of that question. Yes, sir.
give you your roses. Thank you for the tenure you're giving us in St. Louis. A couple years ago, probably 3-4 years ago, one of my favorite things in the world, personal, is we got a Mo prospect, right? You were down to spring training, you saw somebody, they stuck out. Last guy, you told me, I asked you a question, you said it was Mason Wynn. I think he's been okay since he's come up. Give me one more before you go. What's the next Mo prospect? What's the guy we're not talking about, we're not thinking about, that we should
I don't know if you guys are talking about, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, like Rangel Rodriguez, 18-year-old that just swings it. You know, very rarely do you see a young person that at 18 can do what he's doing. And I think he's just like built to hit. And
That's good. That's like great.
you know, I usually don't get too excited about young players, but this is a guy that I think has a future to be a real bat. So
Thank you.
I don't know how many people are on him, but he's legit. By the end of the year, everybody will be on him. I mean, if he's not a top 100 prospect, I'll be shocked.
Thank you.
Just following up a little bit on your CBA question. So I kind of had two angles for it. You know, the Cardinals have had difficulty with the TV contract, just uncertainties as you approach off seasons from a revenue standpoint. You know, how will that impact maybe some of the decisions you make about maybe locking up like an Ivan Herrera or Mason Wynn in the pre-arb years? And then also, just as a fan, you know, what if you had an opportunity to kind of, this is a big question, but just what would be the number one change you'd make if you could, if you were in charge of the CBA?
Okay, so a couple things. My first thought on you know where the Cardinals are relative to sort of the market. I mean, I think a lot of teams are dealing with TV issues. So I think when you're looking at sort of the overall scope of where baseball is, you have, let's just break it down, a third, and a third, right? You have a third of the clubs that really don't have financial challenges. You have a third that are, on any given year, might feel good about where they are or might not. And then there's a third that just hate baseball economics. They just feel they can't compete. Now, knowing that, the Cardinals are still in that middle group. And, you know, we have to look at ways to, find new ways for local revenue. Clearly, the TV issue is going to be something that's going to be over our heads over the next few years. Because if you think about the TV bubble, you know, 15, 20 years ago, everybody was just like jumping at it, and they were getting these massive deals. But unfortunately, the bubble popped, and you know, now we're trying to figure out what's next. Now, I do think, like, if I ask this question, I'm going to assume many of you in this room don't, but how many people actually still have cable in this room? Right. So you'd be surprised. On most rooms I go into, it's like still like 70%, which is scary. But like most people in the country are you know, actively streaming. That's how they're purchasing stuff. And so I do think like the future of entertainment rights are going to improve over time. So I'm bullish on that or optimistic on that. Now, when I think about like, how do you address the CBA or baseball's issue on revenue, I am an advocate for a floor in the ceiling. I do think it's frustrating when you see teams that just don't invest in the Major League club, and then you're seeing a ton of money invested at like the R&D side. And I mean, if I were the Players Association, I'd be somewhat focused on like where is the money going? But net, I think if you were able to have a floor and a ceiling, I think you know you would be able to at least control, if you will, other like smaller markets having more of a chance to truly compete. I think as time has gone on, St. Louis Cardinals, which is arguably what the 25th or 26th size market in baseball, the reason we were able to compete was we had an owner that was willing to deficit spend at times. We had a fan base that came out and supported us, and at the time we had a robust TV contract. Not so robust that they wanted to get rid of us, right? The teams that probably had the most like unbalanced or unfair TV contracts were the ones that were getting cut off right away. But as we start to restructure all of this, we do have to figure out a way that's going to allow these mid-sized clubs and these small market teams to be more competitive. So hopefully there's a solution for that, but it's not quite as easy as it sounds, because some of these clubs, potentially where a floor might have to be, might not even be able to afford the floor. So that's going to have to be somewhat of a restructure, possibly for ownership.
Mo, you've already spoken about the uniqueness of the transition of leadership that doesn't typically happen in any major sports league. Can you speak to the advantages it's provided you and your group to have this season, as well as like what that transition will continue to look like over the next few months until you're officially done with your role?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much of an advantage for me personally, other than I didn't have to like pack up my office and move to the bar. That's encouraging. But I think the advantage for Chaim and his team is, think about it this way: you get hired to run a company, whatever size, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000, and what are you spending the first part of your time doing? You're trying to like understand your team, right? I'm sure that many people in this room have read Good to Great, right? Running a company, business, and there's a chapter in there that they talk about, are people on the bus? Meaning, are people going to like pull in the same direction? And if they're not, that's the people you got to get rid of. And so I think for Chaim and his group, Chaim's going to have 2 years of understanding what this team looks like. And then, we had a massive insurgence of human capital, new employees last year. And so that's come in. And so I think like overall, these guys aren't going to be spending 6 months or a year trying to understand what they have. They're just going to hit the ground running. So I think they're going to have a lot of wind at their back. And I think for them that transition is going to be much more seamless.
Can you speak a little bit to like what that transition continues to look like over the next few months? Like, is there kind of a handoff happening mid-season?
Everybody asks me when that's going to be. How soon do you want it? Just curious. I think obviously as we get to the trading deadline, depending on where we are in this thinking, certainly want everyone's input from a collaboration standpoint. But if we're looking to really like think about this year, or are we thinking about the future? And if we're thinking about the future, obviously I'm going to have to help defer to him on what he wants to see happen. Yes, sir.
You had mentioned earlier about how in the past, you weren't sure about who would be that next person up or something like that with injury, and now you have kind of that lineup set up. As your tenure here, it's kind of come to a close. Do you think this is, as far as players and development go, the best, long-term Cardinals will have looked, probably the past decade or so?
I think there's been, we have had success like in that 6-year free agent market at times where we have had, people come up, contribute in a very positive way. I think what's so striking about, this year was, like a Fernandez, for example, how he was a Rule 5 last year. Obviously, we had zero flexibility with him, and he actually pitched well. And then this year, struggled a little bit early. Now he's getting back to where we think he could be a positive contributor up here. So I think overall, we've just done a very nice job on our sort of smaller acquisitions, if you will. But it's also timing of some of the players that we've developed that it's working. You think back to a year ago, and think about like Victor Scott. He makes our club. Now, he made it because of an injury, but the timing of him to actually be on the team last year was not ideal. Like in a perfect world, he's not on the team. Whereas this year, he comes into camp. We don't have him penciled in as our starting center fielder. We have Siani, figuring, let him keep developing. It's a great camp. All of a sudden, we erase Siani and put in Victor Scott. Now, I know, we're just turned the calendar to June, and offensively he's starting to struggle a little bit, but he now fits in a lot better. And so I think when you think about depth and timing, this year we're just, I think all of those things are aligning versus in past years they just weren't, right? 2023, Jordan Walker probably could have used more time, but forced his way on, here we are. So I think just from when I look at our roster and our depth, I feel pretty good about it. And sort of the interesting test is always all right, if you have a waiver claim, who's first person off? If that's hard to answer, that's a good thing. If it's super easy, where someone gives you 3 names, that's a problem. And I've experienced all of that. Yes, sir.
Amon Herrera's been one of the best hitters in baseball for the season, but he's been catching pretty infrequently. Are you at a point for this season at least just viewing him as a bat and trying to figure out his defense as he moves on because how good Pedro's been?
Yeah, this is the tough one, right? Because if he can hit and be a catcher, that's enormous value. But I do feel like from a defensive standpoint, he is working through things. And as you're trying to win baseball games, having his bat in lineup, crucial. And then having a more defensive-minded catcher is also helpful. So what Ollie and his group is trying to really do is just walk that fine line of, how do we keep developing, but how do we also keep winning baseball games? And given the success of the club, it's not just quite as black and white maybe as normal. And so it's going to be part art, part science as we kind of work through this, and hopefully we can navigate it. But his best position is definitely the batter's box.
We're going to do about 3 more questions for him. I'll be mindful of this time here.
Are we doing okay on that thing? Yes, sir.
So you spoke recently about, or earlier about Walt in 2004. Can you kind of, I don't remember hearing any public comments from you after his passing. Can you kind of talk about what he meant to you in your career and just some of the things you think back fondly about the experiences with him?
Yeah, so Walt and I actually go back to Colorado. And so when he brought me into St. Louis, the Cardinals were at a very unique part in their history. And on a personal level, Walt was an amazing friend, amazing mentor, and someone that gave me just an enormous runway and opportunity in the game of baseball. And if you look back at my career before I got into baseball, not an ex-player. I have no family involved in the industry. I had not an Ivy League grad. My path is very different than sort of like traditional people that run teams and get opportunities. And Walt gave me that opportunity. And he and I, during my tenure with him, we were very close. The opportunities that he provided me were amazing. And I think back to my time, and I'm extremely grateful for every day I got to spend with him. He was a very generous man. He taught me a lot about this industry, about how the game works. He just gave me like a runway of exposure that most people just don't get.
Would you say you're in turn kind of paying that forward to some of the players on the field right now today?
I hope Walt's legacy, I am tangentially connected to it or directly connected to it. I have to do things a little different because the game's changed, it's modernized, but a lot of sort of my core sort of basic principles, if you will, were something that he taught. So when I think about like the 2 biggest influences on my career, clearly Walt Jockney was one, and Bill DeWitt was another. And that might sound odd saying like, oh, just your 2 bosses, and 2 bosses in very different ways. But I think like Walt gave me, the ability to understand like what is baseball IQ, and I think Bill gave me what is business IQ. And I think when I look back at my time or what I've been able to do here, it's really been a little bit of both. And I think back to both those men and what they did for me, and I'll be forever grateful.
So as Carson alluded to, you've ultimately had a lot of success, and you are the longest tenured baseball executive in the National League. But nonetheless, there is this ongoing tension that just seems kind of to be a given between fans and leadership in sports organizations. Do you think that there are ways that the inside workings of baseball franchises could be better communicated to fans to educate and engage? And what do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of your job from a fan perspective?
Okay, let's start with the first one. The answer is no. I don't think you could do anything to make everyone happy. Think about politics. It is like, no matter who won the presidency, what percentage was going to be miserable? 49%, right? It's a little bit like sports. No matter what we do, even on a given day where we make, quote, everyone happy, it's 24 hours. It is a small life cycle. So trying to appease that or manage to that, I don't think is very helpful. And when you talk about like, is there something more we could be more transparent about or sharing with people more? I don't know how much more transparent sports teams can be, right? I mean, like, everybody gives access to the media. Like, there's no one in the media, if they called me on any given day, I wouldn't take the call, right? Ollie does a pregame, a postgame. I mean, like, ask him a question if you feel like, and like, he chooses not to answer it, that's on him, right? But like, I think like access is there, and we try to provide that. I just think, given the environment of sport, it's impossible to keep majority happy, right? And even if you are at that 50 or 51%, you probably should call it a win, okay, frankly. And then, what was the other question?
The most misunderstood aspect of your job.
Oh yeah, okay. So I think like people in my role think it's just like 24/7 major league club. And do I think about our major league club a lot? Yes, but it is not my sole duty, right? There's a scouting department, there's a player development department, international department, and those are things that like truly help drive this train, right? As you guys have heard me talk about, right? You think about like a major league team and 4 legs on the table, right? Scouting, player development, throw analytics in there, international, however you want to do it, medical. But the moment you take your eye off one of those legs, what happens to the table? It gets wobbly, or it might even fall. And so ultimately that's my responsibility. So making sure those are strong. So if they're strong, this tends to be work. That's what you're hoping.
I know we probably have a few more questions, but just one more thing for Mo before we leave, because he's been here about 30 minutes and going to be cognizant of his time. I want to invite Kyle Reese up real quick to share something with Mo on behalf of the Waters.
Wow, gift.
Yeah, we know that
I was kidding, man.
a lot of fan bases don't get this opportunity, so we're thankful. Just like with Nolan Arenado and you guys this offseason, sure it got tense at times, but we were thankful. So you're gonna,
photo.
yeah. Oh no. Oh my God. You're gonna have to open it though. I'm sorry because I put Scotch tape on there. Good luck.
Well, I guess along the same lines, just real quick, do you think, for example, like, would you ever consider kind of a la David Sampson's transition into the media, giving us more of a peek behind the curtain, and whether that be via podcast or book in the future?
Book, podcast, can't rule out, but not something I'm thinking much about at the moment. And as far as like true future, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I could imagine like I might stay in some capacity with the Cardinals, but I would definitely want my focus more on the business side of baseball because I feel like Chaim and his group, they just need like kind of a clear path. I think like, with me hanging around, it gets awkward. I think that wouldn't be fair. But short view is I just want to take a couple months off, take a deep breath, and kind of reset myself.
Well, and the last one with Daniel here.
You've heard the word last a lot over the last little bit, and you're having these last moments. Are you having a chance to step away and appreciate your last trade deadline, the last time you deal with us, the last time you deal with, as it gets along in the media and in this role? Are you able to appreciate that?
The answer is yes, but not in the sense of like where I'm just like in a reflection at all, because I feel like my job is still my job, right? Like, so I need to just like do that. The moment I start like, oh man, this is cool. Like I feel like I lose, like I take my foot off gas and now I'm pumping brakes. And like, you can't do that in this role. You have to like stay like just laser focused. And so the way I'm hoping is like when I get to October 31st, that's where I can take those next few months and kind of think back and smile, enjoy it. But like, look, what I get to do is amazing. It's so much fun. There's times you hate it, of course, but like that's life. Not every job job's perfect. And I've been fortunate to be a part of this great organization and work with great people, even you tunes. And you know, it's been fun. I mean, it really has. So thank you guys so much. Hopefully we get this one in, and I'm sure we'll see you around.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.